morning, everybody. It's so good to be here this morning for this final kind of session on our sermon series of serving. And do you know what? I'm really glad that we had that song, because if you remember nothing else, just go home singing that song, because it's basically what I'm preaching on this morning. I don't know about you, but for me, 1 Peter, this passage challenges me every single time that I read it. I sometimes find it difficult to serve in the way that Peter is encouraging the early church to here. When his exhortation to serve one another without grumbling can be quite intense as a command. It reminds me of when my parents would tell me when I was little to stop whinging, or to stop pulling such a sour face when I was asked to do something that I really didn't want to do. And it's probably words which I echo to my own children now, unfortunately. But as an adult even, it's particularly challenging when I've just gotten up in the morning and we're running late for the school run and I have to get to college for chapel at 8:30 every morning. And my husband tells me that his bike tyre is flat. And it can be really difficult in those moments to get the breakfast ready, to help the girls get ready for school and nursery without grumbling, at least a little bit. I wonder if there are times that you can think of when you've served through really gritted teeth. What was impacting that? A lot of what we're faced with, though, is so trivial compared to what the church in Asia Minor, who Peter was writing to, would have been contending with. They were truly up against it, facing persecution and hard-pressed on every side. And Paul is writing to comfort them. Throughout his letter, he reminds them of the spiritual significance of suffering, which might not sound very helpful, but there is significance to suffering. And he's also imploring the church to love one another despite and almost because of the trials that they are facing. Everything that we've looked at over the last few weeks, and this is where you can really test your memory, serving as unity and togetherness, as sharing together, growth and learning, those things can be so hard to focus on as objectives when you're in a really tight spot. When life gets tough or we feel the overwhelm of busyness, it is so easy for disunity to reign, as we move from probably cheerful serving to actually the need for self-preserving. When the church was focused on survival, it's easy to imagine that serving each other was probably not their main goal, especially not with cheerful hearts, I expect. And when we face persecution, or maybe in our context today, it's maybe just the threat of being late, or missing out on something we want, or tiredness, it's easy to fall into the reactivity of looking out for number one rather than doing the uncomfortable thing. But Peter here is adamant that service should not be pushed aside for the sake of our comfort, but rather that love fuels our sacrificial service to one another amidst our suffering. And what I love about the way that Peter talks here in this passage is the way he expresses himself, but he also gives reasoning. The whole passage kind of dances around this call to love each other through God's strength, as he exhorts them to pray and be watchful, to be hospitable without the grumbling, to minister to one another with the gifts that we each have. He doesn't ask us to do so without providing some tools and wisdom for the how and the why. It is a big ask, but let's look at that call to love each other in God's strength that's woven into the passage. In verse 8 it says, "Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins." I don't know if you've heard this phrase in our everyday English language. It's kind of sometimes referred to, love covers a multitude of sins. But Peter here isn't suggesting that sin is powerless or not worth doing something about, almost as if it gives people some kind of free pass, so to speak. But he is referring directly, actually, to Proverbs 10, verse 12, which says, hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs. By bringing in this passage from the Old Testament, Peter is reminding us of the importance of love in our aim for unity and service. And here I'm not talking about love as a fluffy feeling. Peter uses the Greek word agape, which you might be familiar with. It's a giving love, which is entirely unselfish. Love here is not a weak, conflict-averse excuse for ignoring wrongs that are done to us, but it does do away with bitterness and recognises the strength of forgiveness and the strength of the choice to seek difficult reconciliation. Or again, even just in our daily context, perhaps the strength to get up off the sofa and make that cup of tea that someone has asked you for. Love here is not a weakness, but a powerful motivator in choosing to act. And there's a sacrificial dynamic to this giving love. In the context of serving, what does it look like for us to serve those that we really disagree with, or with whom we have difficult histories? Or even simply to serve when we really don't feel like it, or it brings us discomfort, to serve in the midst of our own troubles. In this way, serving becomes synonymous with loving. It's the same. This idea that we serve, that we are servants, and the difficult nature of that, meaning that any choice to serve has to be an act of love. I'm going to say that again because that is so important. The difficult and sacrificial nature of serving another, putting them before yourself and your needs, means that any choice to serve has to be an act of love in its nature. So, therefore, Paul is telling us, above all, love each other deeply. And please hear this as well. It's not a call just for you as an individual. This is a call to love one another. The thing is about this and about the community of believers that's so wonderful is that we are a body and that it's never up to just the one. If we all choose to listen to Peter, then we're all covered. If each is intent on loving those around them and serving those around them, then even in our own serving, we will find ourselves served by others. One example of this is when a friend was out every night working at a night shelter with the homeless, sleeping in the day with very little time to look after herself. And she was shocked that others in her church family would even drop meals off for her. An example of this cycle of giving and loving and serving, which we are called to, and which means that no one gets left behind or should be overburdened in this call that we are given. So love is not a passive thing. It is often a difficult choice to cover over the struggle and get on with the practical decision to serve anyway. Kind of, when I was thinking about this, presents us with an interesting chicken and egg dynamic. Does our service flow from our love for one another, or is love a consequence, like a byproduct of our choice to serve? Can it be both? I think it can. And then following on a little bit from verse 8 and verse 11, the other kind of hinge of this passage for me, if anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that, here's his reasoning, in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. Do you know what? When it's tough to love and serve others, that is such an opportunity for the love of God. Such an opportunity for his love to be revealed. Peter is telling the church, guys, when you serve, it's actually not even about you. It's not about racking up the brownie points. It's not about any of that. If anyone serves, let them do it in God's strength, so that in all things God may be praised. The spiritual outworking of choosing to do a difficult thing in an act of love is beyond measure in impact. People come to know Jesus that way. If you think even of your own journey to faith and acts of service or love which enabled you to come to that point. And maybe people come to know Jesus that way because, in part, it mirrors his behaviour when he went to the cross. A difficult thing done in an act of love. And maybe that doesn't quite look like laying down your life as Jesus did, but perhaps it could be a sacrifice of time. Sitting with an elderly neighbour while they have their internet installed at the expense of being able to meet up with your friend at the pub. Signing up to help with a new group at church and giving up an evening a week. Hoovering the house to bless your family, even though you'd really rather not, and there are 101 other things you could think of that are far more exciting. I find myself in that place often. But all of these things, from the biggest to the most minute, point to the gospel, a gospel of love in action, a laying down of life at the expense of the other. And I recognise that this is really challenging stuff, and I am speaking to myself as much as to anybody else here. There is always more to be done, always more ways in which we can serve, and it's so good to ponder on our attitude in serving and where our selflessness could be stretched perhaps a little bit more. But when I was prepping for this morning, I really felt God wanted to kind of zoom in on us here today and say to us, to say to you, that he sees the existing ways that you serve and that he is well pleased with you. And just a reminder that it blesses him when we bless each other. In Matthew 11:30, Jesus says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." So in this weighty call to love one another in service, it can be light when we rely on Jesus and lean into our relationship with him and depend upon him. You might be someone who helps a lot in the life of the church. Thank you. We need those people. But a reminder in all of this that Jesus does not want anyone to burn out. This is not the message here this morning. It is not up to the one, the old reliables. This is a call for all to carry the yoke of Jesus in serving each other. And in doing so, we are loving each other and sharing the joy of participating in God's kingdom. 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, "Do everything in love." Loving is synonymous with serving. It's the same. It's not a passive thing, but love gets stuck in and resources our actions, turning them into sweet sacrifices of great worth to God. If serving is a bit of a dirty word to you, or something that sounds like hard work, just see it as loving instead. If there is one thing to remember today, it is that serving looks like love in action. And actually, if God is love, then serving must look like God in action. And this should encourage us. As we've heard from Peter, all serving should be done in the strength that God provides. Serving is God in action through our hands and feet. Let's remember to ask for his help so that we might see others through his eyes, that we might love each other deeply, offering hospitality without grumbling, being stewards of God's grace, serving in his strength, so that in all things God will be praised through Jesus Christ. As we sang just before this, let's remember to imitate our servant King. I'm just going to pray, and then we will go into our intercessions with Chris. Loving Father, you are the creator of all that is good. Every good and perfect gift flows from you. Thank you that you call us to bring your love to life in a way when we serve each other. Help us to love each other so deeply that serving is a joy and a privilege that comes naturally, forming good habits within us and bearing witness to all those we might meet. Help us, Lord, when it's painful to love people. If you're able to, let's take a moment just to call to mind those people that we find difficult to love. Father God, you know our situations and the hurts that we carry. Please come and be to each of us all we need in those circumstances. Healer, mediator, comforter, wisdom. Bring your peace. And thank you, God, for sending your Son, Jesus, in the ultimate act of love in action, as he came and chose to serve rather than to be served. Help us to look to his selfless example in all that we do, and give us the strength to follow your call to service, even when it is costly. Amen.